Long ago, when the pyramids were still young, Egyptian kings played games of great and terrible power. More recently, people play the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, but ancient or new, both of these games involve some pretty sick beatdowns. So here's the top 10 beatdowns of the Duel Monsters anime. For the number 10 spot at the start of this list, we're going back to the very beginning. Although the very first episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh would establish Yugi and Kaiba as opposing forces, forever destined to clash, both duelists had the same primary goal during the duel's Kingdom arc: defeat Maximilian Pegasus. But while Yugi would actually accomplish this goal, ex-Duel Monsters world champion Seto Kaiba got thoroughly thrashed in his bout against the creator, covered by episodes 26 and 27. The game starts with Pegasus seemingly on the defensive, double setting a monster and a trap before passing over to Kaiba, who wastes no time attacking with Rude Kaiser. The defending Toon Alligator goes down without a fight, and Kaiba also deflects Pegasus's Parrot Dragon retaliation by using Mesmeric Control. In the TCG, Mesmeric Control would have been totally useless in this and most situations, but Kaiba's anime powers lets his card reduce Parrot Dragon's attack to 1200. Pegasus takes the first damage, but the state of the game takes a hard turn after Kaiba attempts to summon his first Blue Eyes White Dragon. By activating his set trap prophecy, Pegasus can guess whether Kaiba's monster will have less, more, or exactly 2000 attack, and if he's correct, take that card into his own hand. Now is a good time to mention the Millennium Eye, an artifact owned by Pegasus that allows him to penetrate his opponent's mind to read their cards in hand and nascent strategies. Now, that might seem a little unfair, but that's because it is. This is a list of beatdowns. A lot of them aren't going to be fair. Anyway, with Prophecy's guessing game rendered completely redundant, Pegasus claims his prize. Conscious of the 3000 attack beat stick in his opponent's hand, Kaiba attacks from an oblique, summoning Sagi the Dark Clown, and setting his Crush Card Virus. If he can activate this deadly trap, he'll devastate Pegasus's deck, destroying every monster with 1500 or more attack, including his own lost Blue Eyes White Dragon. It's a pretty good play, but requires the destruction of a dark monster with less than 1000 attack. And Pegasus, who has seen his hand, knows this. By activating negative energy to double Sagi's attack to 1200, Pegasus takes Kaiba's strongest trap offline, and things only become more dire from there. With the activation of Toon World, Pegasus is able to transform his monsters into near indestructible toons. After summoning Kaiba's Blue Eyes and morphing it into Blue Eyes Toon Dragon, Kaiba abandons his hand and starts top decking using the heart of the cards. This nebulous force is a representation of the individual character's willpower to win, and manifests in the form of them tending to draw cards beneficial to a given situation. Although Kaiba isn't on board with mystical sorcery, he has determination in spades, and his faith rewards him with the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Eventually, he's successful in comboing with his Shadow Spell to destroy Pegasus's Toon Blue Eyes, using his own original model. But the game isn't over. Without breaking a sweat, Pegasus flips Dragon Capture Jar to remove Kaiba's Blue Eyes, and Dragon Piper to summon it back to his own field. Faced with a second Blue Eyes Toonification, Kaiba takes down Dragon Piper with his Sword Stalker, but Pegasus's Doppelganger card mimics Crush Card Virus to flip the lethal trap back to Kaiba. Left with Monster Reborn and Sagi the Dark Clown as his only target, the disgraced champion is further humiliated. And that's really what makes this duel such a brutal beatdown: the humiliation. Not only does Kaiba lose to the man who stole both his company and Little Brother's soul, but he loses to his own cards, both the Blue Eyes White Dragon and Crush Card Virus. Pegasus spends pretty much the whole duel toying with him very literally. Kaiba might take everything super seriously, but as an opponent, he's a joke to Pegasus, who even takes the Blue Eyes White Dragon, the symbol of Kaiba's power, and turns it into a giggling little goblin. Make no mistakes, this is a proper beatdown, and one of Kaiba's lowest lows. But things don't tend to go super well for mortal duelists who go up against Millennium items without one of their own. Still, another common theme is that duelists who overly rely on their magic without leveraging their own skill eventually suffer for it. Just look at Ishizu, and also Pegasus. Without his magic eye, Pegasus gets trashed by Kaiba in the Pyramid of Light movie, and by My Valentine in a flashback, during the Waking the Dragons arc. And ultimately, that's why Champion vs. Creator takes number 10 on this list. It's not so much Pegasus beating Kaiba down as the Millennium Eye itself, which just has less sauce than the entries to come. And at number 9, we've got a clash between vanilla spellcasters. In the red corner, we have the ultimate wizard in terms of attack and defense, the Dark Magician. And in the blue corner, it's the Lady of Faith. The number 9 spot goes to the time that Yugi's Dark Magician blasted Yami Bakura's Lady of Faith during the series' first major conflict between the spirits of the Millennium Puzzle and the Ring. The time, episode 13 of Duel Monsters' Evil Spirit of the Ring. The situation, the gang is feeling pretty good after Joey's defeat of Rex Raptor and acquisition of the new ace monster, Red Eyes Black Dragon. Then, Bakura shows up at their campsite. Although the chance encounter at first seems benign, Yami Bakura soon materializes, pulling everyone into the Shadow Realm where he intends to claim Yugi's puzzle. This doesn't work, of course, because there's a Pharaoh in there, and Yami Yugi wakes up and the spirits engage in a duel. But not just any duel, a shadow game. The Pharaoh quickly discovers that Yugi and the spirits of their friends have been sealed within their favorite cards, meaning that if Yami Yugi wants to win, he'll have to use his companions as literal pieces in Bakura's sick game. This isn't so bad for Yugi and Joey, whose favorite cards are Dark Magician and Flame Swordsman, but Tristan Taylor's favorite card is Cyber Commander. It has 750 attack points and does nothing. At least Taya chose Magician of Faith, allowing Yami Yugi to recoup Monster Reborn. But the shadows cut both ways, and lurking within Yami Bakura's deck is the Change of Heart spell, the favorite card of the vessel Ryu Bakura. The Spirit of the Ring has no respect for its host, and as a result doesn't anticipate the mortal Bakura's resistance. Yami Bakura's plan is to use Change of Heart to force Yugi, the Dark Magician, to decimate his on-field friends using his mean 2500 attack stat, but the plan doesn't go off. Instead, Change of Heart, embodied by Ryu Bakura, targets and takes over Lady of Faith. The mortal Bakura insists he be attacked, finishing both off and the evil spirit that he's hosting. But in a moment of extreme Pharaoh powers ex machina, Ryu Bakura's plan also doesn't unfold. Instead, using the Millennium Puzzle, Yami Yugi forces Yami and normal Bakura to trade places. With human Bakura now the duelist and the evil spirit forced to occupy his only valid monster, the Lady of Faith, Yami Bakura faces the destiny he laid out for Yugi and co., getting smited out of existence by the Dark Magician. Lady of Faith only has 1100 attack points, and crumbles in the face of dark magic attack. While duelists spend most of their time ordering their monsters around and watching from the sidelines, they still suffer a smidge under their opponent's attacks. But no matter how much life points damage they tough out, the monsters take the brunt of each blow. There are probably some exceptions to this imbalance if the monster is the pair embodiment of a character's Ka energy, but generally monsters shatter into a million pieces while duelists grunt a little bit. When Dark Magician Yugi destroys Lady of Faith Yami Bakura, however, that's a real beatdown, and it will be recognized as such. We've spent a minute in Duelist Kingdom, so for number 8, let's jump way forward to this Season 4 no-holds-barred Duel Monster smackdown between Joseph the Battle City Slugger, Wheeler, and Valon. This was a pretty intense bout, and took up episodes 169 through 172. Joey's got a well-established history of toughing his way through some tough fights. He got struck by lightning when facing against Odeon and almost won a shadow game against Yami Merrick without a Millennium item of his own. But neither of these harrowing encounters were as literally punchy as his duel against Valon. A member of Dart's mysterious gang of orichalcos wielding motorcycle riders, Valon's deck was pretty unconventional. Utilizing his armor monsters, Valon's big play was assembling a suit of power armor for him to pilot and use to actually clobber his opponents. Often, when people talk about piloting Yu-Gi-Oh decks, they don't mean it so literally. As well, covered later in this list, Joey isn't afraid to throw some punches, and his rivalry with Valon runs deeper than just that between two hothead duelists at odds. Back in Battle City, Joey and fellow competitor My Valentine had some unrealized attraction coursing between them, but now Valon is interested. Unfortunately for both of them, Mai is too busy being a really cool Atlantean biker and seeking her own actualization independent of men, and finds their masculine blustering deeply annoying. Of course, Mai's solo quest is really a band-aid for her extreme insecurity, and she'll realize this just a little too late, but back to Joey versus Valon. They're slugging it out. Valon built his suit of power armor, but not to be outdone, Joey activates Red Eye's Transmigration to craft his own dragon-themed battle outfit, taking to the field himself as Lord of Red. But when Joey, the Lord of Red, attempts to attack Valon for game, the biker activates Extinction Fist to remove Lord of Red, and summon back the materials used for the ritual summon. From here, things are looking bad for Joey. But an activation of Grey Robber lets him steal Valon's Big Bang Blow and his Take One Chance spell, lets him recycle the Claw of Hermos, fusing with Big Bang Blow to create Big Bang Dragon Blow. By attributing a Dragon-type monster, Joey can use Big Bang Dragon Blow to punch Valon so hard, all of the biker's monsters and life points are obliterated. What's really noteworthy about this beatdown is that it's not actually one-sided. Most of these entries are going to feature one combatant winning by a lot while the other loses hard. But here, Joey and Valon are both fighting with all they've got. A grudging respect grows between them as formidable competitors. But much more than a traditional duel, Joey vs. Valon is still very much a beatdown. This is actually less of a duel and more of a street fight. And rolling up to number 7 is the dice demon himself, Duke Devlin, for the time he dished a devastating dueling demise to Joey Wheeler. By episode 46 of the Duel Monsters anime, the first major arc had concluded. Yugi toppled Pegasus and returned Grandpa's soul to his body. But that wasn't the only big win. After his runner-up performance in the Duelist Kingdom tournament, Joey was just coming into his own as a professional duelist. Also, Serenity got the money for her eye surgery, which was pretty cool. But doesn't involve giant monsters, so that's the last we'll speak of that. Seems like everything should have been relatively peaceful for Yugi and the gang. But if it wasn't one thing, it's another. And that new thing was a new game store competing with Grandpa's business. Run by young game entrepreneur Duke Devlin, this new shop is all about dungeon dice monsters. A game that's like Duel Monsters, but using dice instead of cards. Upset at this sacrilege, Solomon Moto is out for blood. And he's not the only one. In a shocking turn, the Yugi game actually goes to school, where Joey gets a little jealous of all the girls crushing on the new kid. That newbie is Duke, and he's risen up the ladies with his devilishly dashing dice tricks. Joey gets involved and, in typical Joey move, embarrasses himself and gets tilted, challenging Duke to a duel. Upping the stakes, they also make a bet. If Duke wins, Joey has to follow his orders for a week. But if Joey wins, Duke's fangirl cheerleaders have to cheer for him. Or in the dub, it becomes the more noble condition that Duke has to close his shop since he claimed Yugi cheated to win against Pegasus. The duel begins, and despite Joey taking an early lead with the powerful sword hunter, Duke clears Joey's high-level monster by using Dark Bat as bait for the trap Michizure. He follows up with a spike bot that is easily beaten by Joey's goblin attack force, which switches to defense position after battle. But this was all part of Duke's plan, and in a final riposte, he summons Gradius and flips limiter removal to double its attack to 2400. Joey taunts Duke for what seems like a misplay, until Duke equips Gradius with Fairy Meteor Crush to let his ship deal piercing damage, before firing on the defending goblin attack force and wiping out all of Joey's remaining life points in one move. On its own, this duel was already a pretty bad beatdown. High on his recent victories, Joey's overconfidence makes this loss even more humiliating. But what's worse than a basic beatdown? A televised one. Joey got played by a radio on live television at exactly the moment where the eyes were watching him. And then things get worse. Duke orders Joey to put on a dog suit, and per the terms of their duel, Joey begrudgingly goes dog mode. But not enough for Duke's liking. He flicks a die at his rival's head, and when Joey starts to complain, commands him to bark instead. This is all pretty crazy, and also where Yugi steps in, challenges Duke to a game of their own to liberate Joey, and the match that follows is less of a beatdown, so I'm not gonna cover it here. But yeah, Joey got bodied pretty hard here, strategically and spiritually. And taking number 6 on behalf of the scary clown population, of which there are many in Yu-Gi-Oh!, is PaniK the Eliminator for how bad he got trounced by Yami Yugi. With the duel against PaniK getting covered by episodes 14 and 15 of the anime, this was an early demonstration of what the Pharaoh is capable of doing to someone he dislikes. It also occurred immediately after his shadow game with the Spirit of the Millennium Ring, making this a really crazy and long night for everyone. While Yami Bakura was getting magical blasted by Dark Magician Yugi, My Valentine was busy losing all of her star chips to PaniK. Hired by Pegasus to carve the wheat from the chaff of the Duelist Kingdom contestants' populace, PaniK served as one of the tournament's eliminators, a sadistic duelist exhilarated by his ability to instill fear. PaniK's go-to moves were to attack at night to give his fiendish creatures a field power bonus, and then compound the environmental assault with his Castle of Dark Illusions. In the TCG, Castle is a level 4 with 920 attack and 1930 defense that can increase the stats of all zombie monsters by a small amount every turn. In the anime, Castle of Dark Illusions causes a shroud of darkness to fall over PaniK's side of the field, obscuring his monsters. This leads to the physically damaging sight of his opponent's creatures getting devoured by the darkness itself. But while these scare tactics were successful against some, the Pharaoh is neither intimidated nor amused. Also, Atem is pretty pissed that PaniK tried to burn Yu-Gi-Oh! Alive with flamethrowers built into the side of his custom duel arena before the game even began. After Yami Yugi spends more time calling PaniK a coward, the Eliminator again fires up the flamethrowers. But the Pharaoh remains unfazed. He tells PaniK that the end is coming for him, and prophesizes that the Eliminator's defeat will arrive in 5 turns. This causes PaniK to misplay by sending Reaper of the Cards into Yami Yugi's set Spellbinding Circle in the hopes that the targeted card was actually Swords of Revealing Light. But it wasn't, and when Yami Yugi flips swords on him, PaniK's entire field is revealed. The Pharaoh reminds PaniK of his impending demise by holding up 3 fingers, indicating the 3 turns the Eliminator has left. At this point, it's probably worth stating that this is a very anime duel. Rules are broken, cards do weird things, and shenanigans inevitably ensue. PaniK decides to turtle, combining his Chaos Shield spell with the Castle of Dark Illusions to keep all of his illuminated monsters protected. This proves to be the instrument of his defeat, however, as Yami Yugi uses Catapult Turtle to launch his fused Gaia the Dragon Champion as a projectile to take down the castle's flotation ring. With the castle falling out of the sky, and PaniK's monsters held in place by Chaos Shield, the Eliminator's strategy completely falls apart, and he super loses. Super enraged at his loss, PaniK attempts to kill Yugi with fire and gets his mind crushed. Pharaoh Atem is really good at winning duels. He can control the forces of destiny to draw the right card at the right time, and will his way through even the direst straits. But while Yami Yugi doesn't hold back against opponents he respects, like Joey Wheeler, Seto Kaiba, and even enemies like Merrick Ishtar and Maximilian Pegasus, he's always saving something a little special for rivals he truly despises. Not only does Yami Yugi beat PaniK, but his taunts manipulate the Eliminator into bringing about his own destruction. The Pharaoh often tells his opponents that they will lose, but only once did he correctly identify the exact number of turns remaining in the duel, and smugly share that information just to watch the other guy squirm. We'll see more of the Pharaoh's vicious side later on in this list, but first, let's talk about a time when someone beat down Atem. This list number 5 spot is from episode 159, and if you've only ever watched the English dub, you might have missed it. In this episode, Joey decks the Pharaoh with a Wild Haymaker, dropping the Ancient Spirit instantly. While the Pharaoh is really good at dueling and enacting punishment against those he finds undeserving, he doesn't always make the best choices. Sometimes he gets a little carried away in his win at all costs no matter who dies competitive spirit. During his Canyon duel against the Orichalco's biker gang leader Raphael, Yami Yugi really lets his dark side out when he chooses to activate the Seal of Orichalcos. Why does he do this, transforming what otherwise would have been a relatively low-stakes heated duel into a soul-stealing death match? Well, Raphael was talking a lot of smack. Broadly speaking, the Pharaoh wants to do good, but with his living memories lost, Atem doesn't actually know what kind of king he was. Raphael salts his wound, using his own philosophy of the necessity of balance between dark and light to write off his own questionable deeds. Although Raphael is totally misguided and manipulated by darts, the Pharaoh seems shaken by his perception of moral balance, something the Spirit of the Millennium puzzle lacks. After Raphael uses exchange to force his copy of the Seal of Orichalcos into Yami Yugi's hand, he begins whittling away Yugi's little life points and monsters, pushing Yami into a double corner under Duel Monster and Ideological Assault. Unable to confront his own potential to express darkness, the Pharaoh overrides little Yugi's will to activate the Seal of Orichalcos. It might be the bleakest moment of the entire show, and Atem pays for it. After losing the duel and his King of Game titles to Raphael, the Seal of Orichalcos claims little Yugi's soul. Heartbroken at the steep toll of his own wrath, the Pharaoh sits in a stupor, awaiting the retribution that may come. Turns out, vengeance arrives in the shape of Joey's fist. After finding out the Pharaoh's rash and emotional turbulent actions have blown back on his best friend, Joey is really pissed off. He hoists Atem up by the collar and punches him hard in the jaw. So hard that the 5,000-year-old spirit goes tumbling into the dirt. While the actual punch is omitted from the English anime, that version does include the collar hoist and hard fall, heavily implying that the punch still occurs, even if it's unseen. And at number 4, we've got Mr. Beatdown himself, Seto Kaiba. In episode 60, he uses his god card Obelisk the Tormentor to obliterate a random duelist who's so unimportant, I had to look up his name for this script. Rest in peace, Koji Nagumo. Because Kaiba's real reason for hosting Battle City was to claim the remaining 2 god cards, he instituted an anti-rule. The loser of each tournament game surrenders the rarest card to the victor. Koji Nagumo wins a match, good job Koji, but isn't happy with his prize card. Mokuba catches him demanding his opponent yield their second rarest card as well, and reprimands him. Come on, Koji. But then Koji disrespects Mokuba, calling the younger Kaiba brother Junior. Uh-oh, Koji. Seto Kaiba's spidey sense for when people are disrespecting Mokuba goes off, and he confronts the misbehaving duelist, challenging him. To make things quotation mark fair, unquotation mark, Kaiba opens his briefcase for Koji, giving the duelist free use of some of his most powerful cards. But what Koji Nagumo doesn't have is the Obelisk the Tormentor, and Seto crushes him with a monster the size of a skyscraper. While this scene is perhaps less psychologically poignant than the others, it's a solid beatdown. Kaiba teed Koji up just to knock him down, because no matter how strong Kaiba's other cards are, he doesn't give away gods. After all, who does that other than a Shizu? Still, this is a pretty intense display of Kaiba's power directed down at someone who simply could never contest. Luckily for Koji, his brush with Obelisk would prove merely traumatizing and not fatal. He can be seen again in the background of Joey's duel during Yu-Gi-Oh! Pyramid of Light movie. His name also makes a few tiny cameos in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, listed once in Axel Brody's database of Domino High School students, and again in a list of Domino City residents disappeared by Night Shroud. And at number 3, we're taking it way back to Egypt. 5,000 years ago, there were no trading cards. There was no Konami, and there was definitely no 4Kids TV. What the ancient Egyptians of Yu-Gi-Oh! Did have were giant tablets and giant monsters. And the number 3 spot goes to episode 202 and 203, when the Thief King Bakura breaks into Atem's palace to challenge the entire Pharaoh's court for the Millennium items. In the modern age, Yami Bakura and Yami Yugi engage in a complex shadow game that takes the ancient Egypt of their shared past as its stage. The spirits of the Millennium Ring and Puzzle both occupy roles within this game, with Atem playing as the Pharaoh, and the Spirit of the Ring taking on the mantle of the Thief King, sole survivor of the Kul Elna massacre. The Thief King kicks off their squabble by carrying the sarcophagus of Akhenaten, Atem's father, deep into the Pharaoh's turf. Having claimed Akhenaten's magic proto-duel disc, the Thief King faces the judgment of the Pharaoh's advisors. But Karam with the Millennium Scale cannot measure his evil. Akhenaten with the Millennium Eye cannot pierce the darkness of his mind. And Shada of the Millennium Key witnesses a horrific vision of the beast within Thief King Bakura's soul. After the Thief King's ace monster Diabound is revealed, Priest Seto tries to seal it in an empty tablet using the Millennium Rod, but is unsuccessful, and then the fight begins. First up is Seto's Gelstagoras versus Bakura's Winged Sage Falcos, with Falcos winning the bout. This is notable because Winged Sage Falcos was one of Akhenaten's monsters, intended to guard his tomb forever. The Thief King has stolen again. It's at this point that the Thief King Bakura identifies himself as the sole survivor of Kul Elna, where Akhenaten perpetuated a massacre to create the Millennium items. It's also at this point that the entire court is aggroed and summons their monsters. Seto calls out BattleLogs to replace Gelstagoras, and is joined by Karam's Basset, Isis' Hesperia, Shady's Zelua, Akhenen's Gadius, and Mahad's Illusion Magician, which bears a striking resemblance to the modern Dark Magician. Although Mahad's monster is able to vanquish the turncoat Winged Sage Falcos, Bakura's Diebound Colonel is able to knock back every other combatant. After Priest Seto summons Mystic Horseman, Karam uses the magic of his Millennium Scale to fuse it with BattleLogs, performing what might be history's first fusion summon to create Rapid Horseman. None of this works, however. Diebound is able to shrug off Rapid Horseman and destroy Illusion Magician. It starts tearing apart the rest of the court's sacred guardians, and by this point the Pharaoh's advisors are starting to panic. It's a 6v1 duel and they're getting face rolled. Sensing their flagging morale, the Pharaoh steps in, summoning Obelisk the Tormentor. Although Diebound isn't yet strong enough to rival the god, Yami Bakura prepared for this moment, and the Thief King releases a burst stream of destruction that Yami Bakura in the present had stolen from modern Kaiba. This causes the match to end in a draw, with Diebound and Obelisk both destroyed. The real significance of this beatdown is that before the arrival of the Thief King, life in Atem's kingdom appeared static. The Pharaoh was seemingly just, and the magic powers of his court ensured the stability of their government. Thief King Bakura changes that. With his tale of violence, lies, and death, he upends Atem's belief in his father's benevolence. More maternally, with his diabound, Thief King Bakura shatters the entire court's illusion of safety. They might have power, but so does the Thief King, and the monsters born from rage and sorrow of dead Cole and El is stronger than anything Atem's side can offer, short of a god. What makes this a real beatdown is that if you ask any of the Pharaoh's court that morning how they would handle an intruder, they'd probably be completely unbothered. Sure that their guards, monsters, and magic could handle any situation that might arise. But they are badly mistaken, and then they are thoroughly trounced by the legacy of their own government's secret sin. The second to last beatdown on this list goes to the clash between Zigfried von Schroeder and Seto Kaiba during the final round of the Kaiba Corp Grand Championship, covered in episodes 194 and 195. Originally, the Grand Championship Finals were meant to conclude with a match between contestants Leon Wilson and Siegfried Lloyd, both of whom entered the tournament under fake names to obscure their sibling relationships from the Kaibas. This subterfuge was necessary in part of Siegfried's plans to technologically infiltrate Kaiba Court systems and do corporate espionage and whatever. See, him and Seto weren't friends as kids, and they're not friends now. Actually, that's kind of understating it. Although they were both groomed to become CEO prodigies of their parents' figures companies, Kaiba has always been first. When Zigfried ascended to the power within Schrödinger Corp, he cut their war crimes department to take his organization in a new direction, into the games industry. He wasn't copying Kaiba, but he would learn from one of his executives that Seto had done the same thing with Kaiba Corp just as Zigfried made his move. Then, determined to surpass his childhood rival, Zigfried developed a holographic dueling system, but before he could present his device to Maximilian Pegasus at Industrial Illusions, Kaiba got there first, and locked down that corporate partnership. Point is, Zigfried has a superiority complex when it comes to Kaiba, but the finals match between the brothers von Schrödinger never pans out. Having solved a few aspects of Zigfried's plot, Seto Kaiba disqualifies him, making Leon the de facto winner. In rage, Zigfried calls Kaiba a coward, and Seto's like, "No dude, we're gonna duel right now." And then things get started. What follows is an intense duel where two super powerful duelists deploy huge swaths of resources to exhaust and outplay their opponent. Zigfried uses a Valkyrie deck that focuses on removing enemy monsters from play while swarming the field and manipulating the state of the game with his goddess's support cards. For Kaiba, we've seen him duel many times before this point, but although some of the cards and strategies he breaks out during this match are familiar, like XYZ Dragon Cannon and his trademark Blue Eyes White Dragon, we also see him break out some new cards, like Pitch Dark Dragon and a powerful ace in the pre-errata Chaos Emperor Dragon Envoy of the End. Although the duel is far from a total beatdown in that Zigfried does put up a good fight, the final turn is brutal and conclusive. Kaiba summons a horde of powerful dragons, while Zigfried only has one Valkyrie Brunhilde to contest Luster Dragon number 2, Chaos Dragon Envoy of the End, and the 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons. Although Brunhilde is able to use her effect to stick around for a few battles, first destroying Luster Dragon number 2, and then decreasing her defense points to avoid destruction at the fangs and the claws of Chaos Emperor Dragon and Blue Eyes number 1, the second Blue Eyes devours a lone Valkyrie, leaving Zigfried wide open for a direct attack from Kaiba's last dragon. It's really the third Blue Eyes that gets you. This beatdown is significant and kind of an anomaly amongst this list. There are no ancient magics in effect, neither combatant uses a Millennium item, and there's no punishment beyond the shame of losing, and losing hard in front of the entire world. This is a grudge match between two dynamos at the top of their game, and an impressive duel within the broader context of the Duel Monsters anime. Throughout the run of the series, a lot of shenanigans go down, from Duelist Kingdom where the game barely had rules, to crazy virtual worlds where there's 10,000 extra rules. By the time we get to the Grand Championship, duelists are making complicated plays with multiple interactions, and it's fun to watch. Zigfried vs Seto is a very modern duel. An early example is Zigfried using Ride of the Valkyries to summon Valkyrie Erste, Zoete, and Dritte all at once. When Kaiba force ends the battle phase with his set negate attack, Zigfried's Mischief of the Time Goddess allows him to immediately advance the state of the game to his next battle phase. But this too is foiled by Kaiba's magical trick mirror, which copies the effective missions of the Time Goddess to bring the game to Seto's battle phase. Usually, Ride of the Valkyrie's powerful swarming effect is mitigated by making you shuffle all monsters from your field during the end phase. But all these time shenanigans mean Zigfried never hits an end phase during the window in which Ride of the Valkyries would shuffle his cards back, allowing him to dodge his own spell's downside. Overall, this is just a really good intricate duel with an epic ending where the Valkyrie Brynhilde is finally brought down in a storm of tooth and claw. And for the #1 beatdown of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, we return to the King of Punishment games himself, Yami Yugi, the Spirit of the Millennium Puzzle. We also return to one of the series' earliest antagonists, former regional champ Weevil Underwood. But we're far from Duelist Kingdom, both geographically and in terms of episode count, with this fateful rematch taking place during episodes 160 through 162. Remember a little earlier where we went over the little time Joey Wheeler punched the Pharaoh? Now we explore the aftermath. With Yugi's soul abducted by the Silvoracalcos, the gang has to take the fight to Darts and bring their buddy home. However, they've still got a few obstacles to hurdle. They're stranded in America and Darts is in Atlantis. They try to take a train to the nearest airport, but then it's a trap train, because suddenly they're all alone on it, and then the cars separate, with Yami Yugi and Taya still on board, while Joey and Tristan are stranded in the middle of nowhere. This is when bottom tier bad guys Weevil Underwood and Rex Raptor pounce. Against all odds, the Orichalcos deem them worthy, and now they're in cahoots with Darts and are back yet again to ruin everyone's day. Rex wants revenge on Joey for taking his red eyes so long ago, and Weevil is mad because his life became a total joke after he was the first contestant eliminated from Duelist Kingdom. The rematch between Yami Yugi and Weevil happens at a tough time and place for the Pharaoh. He's just lost his partner as a result of his own rash actions, and the place is literally tough, since the duel is setting on top of a runaway train. Conditions are already primed to put the Pharaoh under maximum stress, and then on top of that, Weevil's dueling strategies are excruciating. After infecting Yami Yugi's monsters with Parasite Caterpillar and DNA Surgery, Weevil flips Insect Barrier to protect his own monsters, while they tear chunks from Yugi's life points. Eventually, Yami Yugi's infested obnoxious Celtic Guardian hatches into a poison butterfly. The Pharaoh attempts to fuse away this new insect using the Eye of Timaeus, but Timaeus is still miffed at how the Spirit of the Millennium Puzzle betrayed him and little Yugi by activating the Silvoracalcos, and refuses to cooperate. But Yami Yugi is still in the game. He summons Breaker the Magical Warrior and uses its ignition effect to remove Weevil's insect barrier. And this is when the beatdown starts. Weevil has always been better at mind games than he is at dueling, and he attempts to leverage this strength to throw Yami Yugi off his game by holding up a mysterious card and informing the Pharaoh that it contains the soul of little Yugi. Then he rips the card and lets the pieces fly in the whipping train wind, laughing at the Pharaoh's horror. Although he reveals that the torn card was actually Gogi Bore, Yami Yugi's rage is real. Poison Butterfly clears Weevil's armored centipede, and Breaker attacks directly. Then the Pharaoh activates Berserker Soul. At the cost of discarding his entire hand, Yami Yugi can draw until he hits a spell or trap card, and attack with Breaker for every monster he draws and discards in the process. His first two draws are Queen's Knight and Gazelle, the King of Mythical Beasts, and that's enough to bring Weevil's life points to 0, but he does not stop there. The Pharaoh draws and discards 5 more times, Breaker slashing into Weevil's shriveled husk again for every card. Finally, Taya stops the madness, and the Silvoracalcos claims Weevil's soul. Then the train crashes, and they all go flying off. This is hands down the most brutal beatdown in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. Usually when life points hit 0, the game is over. But Weevil gets chopped and chopped and chopped. The duel shows Yami Yugi at his most vulnerable. Throughout the series, we see little Yugi and his friends rely on the strength of the Pharaoh to pull them through many tough situations. But here we see what happens when the Pharaoh is without Yugi, and it's not pretty. It's pretty ugly. This is the vengeful spirit who would have easily crushed Seto Kaiba on the ramparts of Castle Pegasus. Ashamed of his actions and separated from the positive influence of his better half, Yami Yugi is scared and lashing out. And it's even more intense before the dub papered over a few spots. In the original version, the Pharaoh responds to Weevil's cruel joke by telling him to wash his neck and wait. These are the steps a prisoner would take before execution by decapitation, and Yami Yugi's instructions are a death sentence. Alright, and that's the list. If you have another Duel Monsters beatdown you'd like to pitch, or if you have ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.